In a small town in the Midwest, tension filled the air inside a quiet courtroom. The room wasn't packed, just a few people scattered around, some curious onlookers, and a couple of reporters scribbling notes. 16-year-old Amara sat nervously at the witness stand, her fingers fidgeting as she tried to steady herself. She was young, but she knew this moment mattered. Her wide eyes darted between the judge, the lawyer questioning her, and the man sitting across the room who seemed to be glaring right through her. Amara had been accused of shoplifting from a local convenience store. It wasn't much, a candy bar and a soda, but it was enough to land her in handcuffs. She claimed she didn't steal anything, but Officer Kevin Gray, the arresting officer, said otherwise. He'd written up his report, stating that Amara resisted arrest and became aggressive when confronted. Now here they were facing each other again, only this time, it wasn't in a parking lot or a police station. It was in court. The prosecutor asked Amara to explain what happened that day. Her voice wavered at first, but she quickly found her footing. "I didn't take anything," she said firmly, leaning forward slightly. "He came up to me outside the store and started yelling like I was guilty before even asking questions. And then—" She paused, swallowing hard. "Then he threw me against the car and searched my bag. There was nothing there." Her words hung heavy in the room. Some people shifted uncomfortably in their seats while others exchanged glances. Officer Gray listened intently, his jaw tightening with every sentence. When it was his turn to speak, he stood up straight, adjusting his belt buckle as if preparing for battle. His tone was sharp, almost accusatory as he recounted his side of the story. "Young lady," he began, pointing a finger toward Amara, "you're lucky I didn't press further charges. You were belligerent, uncooperative, and clearly hiding something." His voice grew louder, echoing off the walls. "We can't let kids think they can walk all over us without consequences." Amara clenched her fists under the table, trying not to react, but she couldn't stay silent. "That's not true," she shot back, her voice rising. "You planted that stuff in my bag. I saw you do it." The room erupted into murmurs. The judge banged his gavel, demanding order. Officer Gray stepped closer to the stand, his face red with anger. For a moment it looked like he might shout again, or worse. Instead, he did something no one expected. In a flash, he reached out and slapped Amara hard across the face. The sound was deafening, cutting through the noise like a gunshot. Everyone froze. Amara recoiled, her hand flying to her cheek as tears welled up in her eyes. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Even the judge looked stunned, his gavel hovering midair. "What is going on here?" the judge bellowed, slamming the gavel down repeatedly. "Officer Gray, step away from the witness immediately." But Officer Gray didn't move. He stood there, breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling rapidly. Amara's body trembled as she fought back sobs, humiliation burning hotter than the sting on her cheek. No one spoke. The silence stretched painfully long, broken only by the shuffle of papers and the occasional cough. And then, just as chaos threatened to boil over, the door at the back of the courtroom creaks open. Heads turned instinctively, wondering who could possibly enter at such a dramatic moment. Standing in the doorway was a tall, striking woman dressed in a crisp navy blue suit. Her presence commanded attention. She scanned the room slowly, taking in the scene with calm precision. Her gaze lingered on Amara, whose tear-streaked face lit up with recognition. "Mom?" Amara whispered, barely audible over the growing commotion. The woman nodded once, her expression unreadable. Then, with deliberate steps, she walked toward the front of the courtroom, her heels clicking against the tiled floor. Every eye followed her movement, curiosity mounting with each passing second. When she finally stopped near the judge's bench, she pulled something from her pocket, a badge, and held it up for everyone to see. "I'm Agent Evelyn Monroe," she announced, her voice clear and commanding. "And that young woman you just assaulted is my daughter." A hush fell over the room. Even the judge leaned back in his chair, visibly surprised. Officer Gray, still standing near the witness stand, paled noticeably. His earlier bravado evaporated, replaced by a look of sheer panic. Evelyn didn't wait for anyone to respond. With practiced efficiency, she handed a document to the bailiff requesting an immediate halt to the proceedings. "This case," she declared, turning to address the judge directly, is now under federal review. No one dared to argue. The weight of her authority settled over the room like a thick fog. As officers escorted Officer Gray away, Evelyn turned her attention to Amara, whose tears had slowed but hadn't stopped. Without saying a word, she placed a reassuring hand on her daughter's shoulder. It was a simple gesture, yet it carried so much meaning. For Amara, seeing her mother walk in like that felt surreal. She'd always known her mom worked for the government, but she never imagined she'd show up looking like this. Strong, confident, unstoppable. And as the reality of the situation began to sink in, Amara realized something important. Things were about to change. For better, or worse. Little did anyone know this was just the beginning of a much larger story. The courtroom buzzed with whispers as Agent Evelyn Monroe stood tall, her presence filling the space like a storm cloud ready to burst. People exchanged glances, unsure of what to make of the sudden turn of events. The judge adjusted his glasses, studying Evelyn closely while the bailiff handed him the documents she'd submitted. Officer Gray, now seated in the corner under the watchful eyes of two uniformed deputies, looked pale and uneasy. His confidence from earlier had vanished completely. Evelyn turned her attention to Amara, who still sat at the witness stand, clutching the edge of the wooden railing. Her daughter's face was streaked with tears, her expression a mix of shock, relief, and confusion. For a moment their eyes locked, and Evelyn gave her a small, reassuring nod. It wasn't much, but it was enough to let Amara know that she wasn't alone anymore. "Your Honor," Evelyn said, addressing the judge directly. "I've requested an immediate stay on these proceedings because new evidence has come to light that calls into question not only the conduct of Officer Gray, but also the integrity of the investigation itself." Her voice was calm yet firm, leaving no room for argument. The judge frowned, flipping through the papers in front of him. "Agent Monroe, are you suggesting that there's more to this case than meets the eye?" "That's exactly what I'm saying, Your Honor," Evelyn replied without hesitation. "This isn't just about my daughter. It's about exposing a pattern of misconduct that goes far beyond one incident." As Evelyn spoke, Amara watched her mother in awe. She'd always thought of her mom as someone who worked long hours and came home tired, often distracted by phone calls or late-night meetings. But seeing her now in full command of the situation was something else entirely. This wasn't the same woman who cooked dinner or helped with homework. This was someone powerful, someone capable of taking control when it mattered most. Once the judge agreed to pause the trial pending further review, Evelyn approached Amara and gently guided her out of the courtroom. They walked together down the hallway, away from prying eyes and reporters eager to get a comment. When they finally reached a quiet corner near the exit, Evelyn stopped and turned to face her daughter. "Are you okay?" she asked softly, placing both hands on Amara's shoulders. Her tone was different now, softer, warmer, filled with concern rather than authority. Amara nodded, though her trembling lips betrayed how shaken she still felt. I didn't expect you to show up like that," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "How did you even know where I was?" Evelyn sighed, running a hand through her neatly styled hair. "I got a call from your school counselor earlier today. She mentioned you'd been upset and skipped class. When I couldn't reach you, I started making calls. One thing led to another, and here we are." Amara looked down at her feet, guilt washing over her. "I didn't mean to worry you, I didn't know what else to do. That cop, he's been lying since the day he arrested me. Nobody believed me, Mom, not even the principal." Evelyn's heart ached hearing the pain in her daughter's voice. She pulled Amara into a tight hug, holding her close for a long moment. "I believe you," she whispered, "and I promise you, sweetheart, we're going to fix this. Together." Later that evening, back at home, Evelyn sat across from Amara at the kitchen table. A pot of tea simmered on the stove, its scent mingling with the tension hanging in the air. Evelyn poured them each a cup, then leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. "Tell me everything," she said gently. From the beginning. Leave nothing out. Amara hesitated, fiddling with the handle of her teacup. She hadn't told anyone the full story, not even her best friend. But looking into her mother's steady gaze, she realized she could trust her. Slowly, haltingly, she began to speak. It happened after school, she started, her voice shaky at first but growing stronger as she went on. I stopped by the store to grab a snack before heading to the library. When I came out, that officer was waiting for me. He accused me of stealing without even checking my receipt. I tried to explain, but he wouldn't listen. He grabbed my arm and pushed me against the car, searching my bag like I was some kind of criminal. Evelyn listened intently, her jaw tightening with every word. When Amara finished, she reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. "Thank you for telling me," she said sincerely. "Now it's my turn to do something about it." Over the next few days, Evelyn threw herself into uncovering the truth. Using her connections within law enforcement and government agencies, she dug deep into Officer Gray's background. What she found shocked even her. There were multiple complaints filed against him over the years, accusations of excessive force, racial profiling, and tampering with evidence. Yet somehow none of them had stuck. Each case had been dismissed or swept under the rug, buried by a system designed to protect its own. Evelyn spent hours poring over files, cross-referencing dates and piecing together patterns. She reached out to former colleagues who specialized in investigative work, asking for their help in building a solid case. Meanwhile, she kept Amara updated, explaining each step of the process so she wouldn't feel left in the dark. One night, as they sat together on the couch watching TV, Amara turned to her mom with a thoughtful expression. "You know," she said quietly, "you're not really like how I imagined you'd be." Evelyn raised an eyebrow, curious. "What do you mean?" "I don't know," Amara shrugged. "I guess I always thought of you as, I don't know, kind of distant, like you were too busy with work to notice stuff, but now I see how hard you're fighting for me. It's like you're a totally different person." Evelyn smiled faintly, her eyes softening. "I've always cared about you, sweetheart. Maybe I didn't show it as much as I should have, but that doesn't mean it wasn't there. And right now, protecting you is the most important thing in the world to me." Amara nodded, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to feel hopeful. With her mom by her side, maybe, just maybe, they could win this fight. But deep down, Evelyn knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Exposing corruption meant stepping on powerful toes, and people like Officer Gray didn't go down without a fight. Still, she refused to back down. This wasn't just about clearing Amara's name anymore. It was about sending a message that no one, no matter their badge or title, was above accountability. As the days passed, Evelyn prepared for the battle ahead. She gathered evidence, lined up witnesses, and mapped out strategies. And though the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on her shoulders, she faced it head-on, driven by love for her daughter and a fierce determination to see justice served. Little did she know, the hardest part was yet to come. The days following the courtroom incident felt like a whirlwind for both Evelyn and Amara. The weight of what had happened hung heavy over their household, but there was also a strange sense of momentum, a feeling that they were finally moving forward after being stuck for so long. For Evelyn, every hour seemed to bring new challenges, new pieces of the puzzle to fit together. But she was determined not to let it overwhelm her or, more importantly, her daughter. Amara, on the other hand, struggled to adjust to the sudden spotlight. Her face had been plastered across local news outlets, labeled as the teenager who stood up to police brutality. At first, she hated the attention. Strangers would stop her in the grocery store or at school, offering words of encouragement or asking how she managed to stay so strong. It made her uncomfortable, like everyone expected her to have all the answers when in truth she still felt lost most of the time. One evening, as they sat down for dinner, Evelyn noticed Amara picking at her food, barely touching the plate, in front of her. She'd been quieter than usual lately, retreating into herself whenever things got too overwhelming. Evelyn put down her fork and leaned forward slightly, catching her daughter's eye. "You okay?" she asked gently, her voice soft enough to invite honesty. Amara shrugged, avoiding her mother's gaze. "I don't know," she admitted after a pause. "It's just weird. Everyone keeps acting like I'm some kind of hero. But I'm not. I didn't do anything special." Evelyn frowned, reaching across the table to place a reassuring hand on Amara's arm. "You did more than you realize," she said firmly. "Standing up to someone like Gray takes guts. Not everyone has the courage to speak out when they're treated unfairly." "But what if I mess it up?" Amara blurted out, her voice trembling. "What if I can't prove he's lying? What if people stop believing me?" Evelyn sighed, understanding the fear behind her daughter's words. She remembered feeling the same way during her early days in the field. Uncertain, doubting herself, terrified of failure. But experience had taught her that doubt was part of the process. It meant you cared, that you wanted to get it right. "You won't mess it up," Evelyn assured her, her tone steady and warm. "And even if you stumble, that's okay. What matters is that you try. That's all anyone can ask of you." Amara nodded slowly, though the worry in her eyes didn't fully disappear. Evelyn knew this conversation wasn't going to fix everything overnight. Healing took time, especially when trust had been broken, not just in others, but in yourself. Still, she vowed to be there for Amara every step of the way, no matter how hard things got. Later that night, after Amara had gone to bed, Evelyn retreated to her makeshift office, a corner of the living room cluttered with files, laptops, and sticky notes covered in scribbled notes. This was where the real work happened. She pored over documents detailing Officer Gray's past, behavior, searching for patterns that could strengthen their case, complaints from previous victims, internal memos hinting at cover-ups, even anonymous tips from whistleblowers within the department. All of it painted a damning picture of corruption. But digging deeper came with risks. Evelyn knew she was stepping into dangerous territory. People like Gray didn't operate alone. They relied on networks of power designed to protect them. Every file she opened, every phone call she made, brought her closer to uncovering the truth. But it also put her in the crosshairs of those who wanted to keep it buried. One late night, as she scrolled through surveillance footage taken outside Gray's apartment, Evelyn spotted something that sent a chill down her spine. A shadowy figure approached Gray's car, handing him an envelope before disappearing into the darkness. The exchange lasted less than 30 seconds, but it was enough to confirm her suspicions. Gray wasn't just corrupt. He was actively working with criminals to cover his tracks. Her heart raced as she zoomed in on the image, trying to identify the second person. Whoever it was, they moved with purpose, clearly aware they were being discreet. Evelyn immediately forwarded the clip to her team of trusted allies, asking them to run facial recognition software and trace any connections to known criminal organizations. Within hours, they identified the individual as a low-level enforcer, linked to bribery schemes and illegal activities. Armed with this new evidence, Evelyn began building a timeline of Gray's misconduct. Each piece of information added another layer to the story, revealing a web of deceit that stretched far beyond one officer. It wasn't just about slapping a teenager in court. It was about exposing a system built on lies, fear, and intimidation. As the days turned into weeks, Evelyn worked tirelessly, juggling her investigation with efforts to shield Amara from further harm. She arranged for private tutoring so Amara wouldn't have to deal with awkward questions at school, and she hired a therapist to help her daughter process the trauma of the past few months. Despite her busy schedule, Evelyn never missed an opportunity to check in with Amara, reminding her that she wasn't alone in this fight. One afternoon, while reviewing evidence, Evelyn received a call from an old colleague at the agency. His voice was urgent when he spoke. "Evelyn, listen carefully," he said. "There's chatter about retaliation. You need to watch your back, and your kids too." Fear gripped her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Thanks for the heads up," she replied evenly. "But I'm not backing down, not now." Her colleague hesitated before speaking again. "Just be careful. Some battles are bigger than they seem." Evelyn hung up, staring at the screen in front of her. She knew he was right. This fight had grown beyond a single courtroom or a rogue cop. It was about challenging a system designed to protect itself at all costs. But Evelyn had faced monsters before, both literal and figurative. She wasn't about to let this one win. That night, as she tucked herself into bed, exhausted from another long day, Evelyn replayed the events in her mind. She thought about Amara, safe for now but still carrying the scars of what had happened. She thought about Gray, lashing out in desperation because he knew he was losing. And she thought about herself, the woman behind the badge, the mother, fighting for her child, the person willing to risk everything for what was right. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new obstacles to overcome. But for tonight, Evelyn allowed herself a small moment of peace. She closed her eyes, focusing on the sound of rain tapping against the window. Somewhere out there the storm was brewing, but she was ready. The next morning, Evelyn woke up with a sense of purpose that hadn't left her since the courtroom incident. She knew she was stepping into dangerous territory. Taking on someone as entrenched in the system as Officer Gray wasn't just risky. It was almost guaranteed to stir trouble. But Evelyn had spent years navigating high-stakes situations in her line of work. She understood how power operated, how people used fear and intimidation to protect themselves. And she also knew one thing for certain: silence only helped those who wanted to stay hidden. Her first move was setting up a private meeting with Police Chief Daniels. It wasn't easy getting him to agree. He was hesitant at first, brushing off her requests with vague excuses about being too busy or needing proper channels. But Evelyn wasn't about to take no for an answer. Using her connections within federal agencies, she made sure he couldn't ignore her any longer. By the time they finally sat down across from each other in his cramped office, Evelyn had already gathered enough evidence to make him sweat. Chief Daniels leaned back in his chair, arms crossed defensively as Evelyn laid out file after file on his desk. Each document told a story: complaints filed against Officer Gray, patterns of misconduct spanning years, even internal memos hinting at cover-ups orchestrated by higher-ups. The chief's face grew paler with every page. Evelyn slid toward him. "This is troubling," he muttered, rubbing his temples. "But you have to understand, Agent Monroe, these things aren't always black and white. Sometimes officers are put in difficult positions and—" "Difficult positions?" Evelyn interrupted sharply, her voice cutting through his weak defense, like a knife. "Are you seriously trying to justify assaulting a teenager in open court? Because that's not difficult. That's criminal." Daniels shifted uncomfortably, avoiding her piercing gaze. He sighed heavily, leaning forward to speak in a lower tone. "Look, I'm not saying what happened was right. But if we start digging too deep, it'll open a can of worms none of us are prepared for. People will lose their jobs. Trust in the department will crumble. Is that really what you want?" Evelyn stared at him, her expression unyielding. "What I want is justice, not just for my daughter but for everyone who's been wronged by people like Gray. If cleaning house means shaking things up, then so be it." Daniels didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached for a pen and began scribbling notes, muttering something under his breath about federal oversight and public relations nightmares. Evelyn could see the wheels turning in his head. He wasn't stupid. He knew he couldn't brush this under the rug anymore. Still, she wasn't naive enough to think he'd suddenly grow a conscience. Men like him played the game carefully, always looking for ways to minimize damage. As she left the station, Evelyn felt a mix of satisfaction and unease. She'd planted the seed, but seeds took time to grow. In the meantime, she needed to act fast. Officer Gray wasn't going to sit idly by while his career unraveled. If anything, he'd fight back harder and dirtier. That evening, Evelyn called, in reinforcements. Over the years, she'd built a network of trusted allies, people skilled in surveillance, data analysis, and legal strategy. Together, they devised a plan to catch Gray red-handed. They set up cameras outside his home, tapped into phone records, legally of course, and monitored his movements around town. Every piece of information was meticulously documented, creating a trail that would be impossible to deny. Their efforts paid off sooner than expected. One night, while reviewing footage from a hidden camera near Gray's apartment, Evelyn spotted something suspicious. A man matching Gray's description met with another figure in a dimly lit parking lot. The two exchanged envelopes before parting ways. Evelyn's team quickly identified the second individual as a known associate of local criminals, a man with ties to bribery schemes and illegal activities. It didn't take long to connect the dots. Gray wasn't just corrupt, he was actively working with criminals to cover his tracks. Armed with this new evidence, Evelyn leaked the footage to a trusted journalist at a major news outlet. Within hours, the story exploded online. Headlines blared accusations of police corruption, sparking outrage across the community. Protesters gathered outside the precinct, demanding accountability. Social media buzzed with calls for Gray's resignation. Gray, however, wasn't ready to give up without a fight. Cornered and desperate, he decided to strike back where it hurt most: Amara. Late one night, Evelyn received a chilling message on her phone. "Back off, or your kid pays the price." The text came from an unknown number, but Evelyn didn't need to guess who it was from. Her blood ran cold as she read the words over and again, each letter feeling like a punch to the gut. For a moment, fear gripped her. She thought about all the risks she'd taken, all the enemies she'd made throughout her career. Was bringing Gray down worth putting her family in danger? Then she remembered Amara's tear-streaked face in the courtroom, the humiliation and pain etched onto her features. No, Evelyn thought fiercely. This wasn't just about her. It was about protecting her daughter and ensuring no one else had to endure what Amara went through. Instead of backing down, Evelyn doubled her efforts. She arranged for Amara to stay with a close friend outside of town, somewhere safe and far from prying eyes. Meanwhile, she worked tirelessly to gather even more evidence, building an airtight case that would leave Gray with no room to maneuver. Every hour of every day became a race against time, a battle of wits between two determined opponents. One afternoon, as Evelyn reviewed surveillance footage in her makeshift command center, a corner of her living room cluttered with laptops and papers, her phone rang. It was an old colleague from the CIA, someone she hadn't spoken to in years. His voice was urgent when he spoke. "Evelyn, listen carefully," he said. "There's chatter about retaliation. You need to watch. You're back, and your girls too." Fear flickered in her chest again, but she pushed it aside. "Thanks for the heads up," she replied coolly. "But I'm not stopping. Not now." Her colleague hesitated before speaking again. "Just be careful. Some battles are bigger than they seem." Evelyn hung up, staring at the screen in front of her. She knew he was right. This fight had grown beyond a single courtroom or a rogue cop. It was about challenging a system designed to protect itself at all costs. But Evelyn had faced monsters before, both literal and figurative. She wasn't about to let this one win. That night, as she tucked herself into bed, exhausted from another long day, Evelyn replayed the events in her mind. She thought about Amara, safe for now but still carrying the scars of what had happened. She thought about Gray, lashing out in desperation because he knew he was losing. And she thought about herself, the woman behind the badge, the mother, fighting for her child, the person willing to risk everything for what was right. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new obstacles to overcome. But for tonight, Evelyn allowed herself a small moment of peace. She closed her eyes, focusing on the sound of rain tapping against the window. Somewhere out there the storm was brewing, but she was ready. The storm that had been brewing for weeks finally broke. The public outcry over the leaked footage of Officer Gray's shady dealings reached a fever pitch. Protesters flooded the streets outside the police station, holding signs that read, "Justice for Amara," and "No more corruption." News outlets couldn't get enough of the story, airing interviews with whistleblowers, community leaders, and even some brave officers who admitted they'd long suspected something was wrong within the department. For the first time in years, the city felt alive, not with celebration but with anger and demand for change. Evelyn watched it all unfold from her living room, where she sat surrounded by stacks of files and glowing laptop screens. She'd barely slept in days, fueled only by coffee and sheer determination. Her phone buzzed constantly with updates from allies, reporters, and concerned citizens eager to support her cause. Every message, every call, reminded her that she wasn't alone in this fight. Still, the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on her shoulders. This wasn't just about exposing one bad cop anymore. It was about dismantling an entire system built on lies and fear. Gray, meanwhile, was unraveling. The once confident officer now looked like a shadow of himself. He avoided cameras, dodged questions from superiors, and spent most of his time holed up in his apartment, drinking cheap whiskey and staring blankly at the walls. But desperation can make people dangerous. When he realized there was no way out, no corner of the system left to hide in, he decided to take one last shot at revenge. Late one night, Evelyn received another chilling text. "You think you're untouchable? Think again." This time, it came with a picture, a grainy image of Amara walking into her friend's house. Evelyn's blood ran cold. She clenched her fists so tightly her knuckles turned white. Fear clawed at her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. Losing control now would only play into Gray's hands. She immediately called her trusted network, instructing them to tighten security around Amara's location. Then she contacted federal investigators, sharing the new threat and demanding protection for her daughter. Within hours, agents were stationed outside the house where Amara was staying, ensuring she remained safe. Evelyn knew Gray wouldn't stop until he was either behind bars or dead, and while part of her wanted to confront him directly, she also understood that patience was key. Revenge might feel satisfying, but justice required precision. As the trial approached, Evelyn poured everything she had into preparing Amara for what lay ahead. They spent hours rehearsing testimony, practicing answers to potential questions, and discussing strategies for staying composed under pressure. It wasn't easy. Amara still struggled with anxiety, often breaking down in tears during practice sessions. But Evelyn never wavered in her support, offering words of encouragement whenever doubt crept in. "You've already faced the hardest part," Evelyn told her one evening, as they sat together on the couch. "Walking into that courtroom will be tough, but remember why you're doing it. You're not just standing up for yourself, you're standing up for everyone who's ever been treated unfairly." Amara nodded, wiping away tears. "I know, Mom. I don't want to mess it up." "You won't," Evelyn said firmly, pulling her into a hug. "And if you do, that's okay too. What matters is that you try. That's all anyone can ask of you." Finally, the day of the trial arrived. The courtroom was packed. Reporters jostling for seats, activists holding banners, and ordinary citizens eager to witness history unfold. Cameras flashed as Evelyn walked in, her head held high, Amara by her side. For a moment, all eyes were on them. Evelyn gave her daughter a reassuring smile before taking her seat in the front row. When Amara took the stand, the room fell silent. Gone was the trembling teenager who had been slapped in open court weeks earlier. In her place stood a young woman radiating quiet strength. Her voice was steady as she recounted the events leading up to her arrest, describing how Gray had assaulted her dignity as much as her body. She spoke clearly, confidently, meeting the jury's gaze without flinching. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Evelyn presented her evidence. Surveillance footage, internal documents, witness testimonies, all laid bare for the world to see. Each piece painted a damning picture of Officer Gray's corruption, leaving no room for denial. When the prosecutor asked Gray if he had anything to say in his defense, he simply shook his head, defeated. The jury didn't take long to deliberate. Less than 2 hours later, they returned with a verdict, guilty on all counts. Cheers erupted in the courtroom as the judge announced the decision, slamming his gavel down with finality. Amara let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding, tears streaming down her face, not of sadness but of relief. Evelyn wrapped her arms around her daughter, whispering, "We did it." But as the celebrations continued outside the courthouse, Evelyn found herself reflecting on the cost of victory. Her relationship with Amara had deepened through this ordeal, but it had also exposed cracks she hadn't noticed before. She thought about the secrets she'd kept, the sacrifices she'd made in the name of duty. Had protecting her family meant hiding parts of herself? Or had it created distance when connection mattered most? That night, as they drove home together, Amara broke the silence. "Mom," she said softly, glancing over at Evelyn. "Do you ever regret, well, everything? All the stuff you went through to help me?" Evelyn hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Regret isn't the right word," she admitted. "There are moments I wish things could have been easier, for both of us, but I don't regret fighting for what's right. If I hadn't stepped in, who would have?" Amara nodded, processing her mother's words. After a pause, she added, "I'm proud of you, you know. Not just because you saved me, but because you showed me what real courage looks like." Evelyn smiled faintly, her heart swelling with pride and love. "And I'm proud of you," she replied. "You stood tall when it mattered most. That takes guts." They rode the rest of the way in comfortable silence, each lost in their thoughts. For Evelyn, the journey wasn't over yet. There were still battles to fight, systems to reform, and lessons to learn. But for now, she allowed herself to bask in the hard-won peace. Justice had been served, not perfectly, not completely, but it was a start. And sometimes, that was enough. The days following the trial passed in a blur of emotions. For Amara, life felt like it had been split into two distinct parts, before the courtroom and after. The weight she'd carried for so long seemed lighter now, though not entirely gone. She still thought about the moment Officer Gray slapped her, the sting of humiliation that had lingered long after the physical pain faded. But something inside her had shifted. She no longer saw herself as a victim. She was a survivor. Someone who had faced injustice head-on and come out stronger on the other side. At school, things were different too. Word had spread about what happened. Not just the slap, but the corruption scandal that followed. Some kids whispered behind her back while others approached her with quiet respect. One girl in her history class stopped her in the hallway one afternoon. "You're really brave," she said shyly before hurrying away. Amara stood there for a moment, surprised by the compliment. It wasn't something she'd ever considered herself to be, brave, but maybe it was true. Inspired by her mother's example, Amara decided to channel her experiences into something positive. She joined the school newspaper, eager to use her voice to shine a light on issues that mattered. Her first article focused on police accountability, drawing from her own story without naming names or revealing too much detail. When it was published, her teacher praised her for its honesty and impact. "This is powerful," he told her. "Keep writing." Meanwhile, Evelyn found herself at a crossroads. The trial had exposed more than just Officer Gray's misconduct. It had forced her to confront her own choices as a mother and a professional. For years, she'd kept her work hidden from Amara, believing it was safer that way. But watching her daughter stand tall in the courtroom made her realize how much she'd underestimated her strength. Hiding hadn't protected Amara. It had left her unprepared for the harsh realities of the world. Determined to make amends, Evelyn began opening up more. Over dinner one night, she shared stories from her time in the CIA. Carefully edited versions, of course, but enough to give Amara a glimpse into the life she'd always wondered about. "I used to think keeping secrets would keep you safe," Evelyn admitted, stirring her tea. "But I see now that trust is what keeps us connected." Amara listened intently, nodding slowly. "It's weird," she said after a pause. "I always thought you were this untouchable person, like nothing could ever hurt you. But now I know you're just human." Evelyn chuckled softly. "Yeah, well, being human isn't easy. But it's all we've got." In the weeks that followed, Evelyn accepted a new role within the agency, one focused on training future agents in ethics and accountability. It was a departure from her fieldwork days, but she welcomed the change. Teaching gave her a sense of purpose, a chance to shape the next generation of operatives into people who valued integrity over power. She also started speaking publicly about systemic corruption, using her platform to advocate for reform. Her speeches resonated deeply with audiences, many of whom thanked her afterward for giving them hope. As spring turned to summer, life began to settle into a new rhythm. Amara spent her afternoons working on articles for the school paper, her confidence growing with each word she wrote. Evelyn balanced her teaching duties with advocacy work, finding fulfillment in both. Together, they rediscovered the joy of simply being a family, cooking meals together, taking weekend drives, and laughing over old memories. One evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, Amara turned to her mom with a thoughtful expression. "Do you think things will ever really change?" she asked. "Like, will there ever be a time when stuff like what happened to me doesn't happen anymore?" Evelyn sighed, leaning back in her chair. "Change takes time," she said gently. "It's not going to happen overnight, but every step forward matters, even the small ones. What you did standing up and telling your truth, that's part of the change. And so is everything we've done since then." Amara nodded, absorbing her words. After a moment, she smiled faintly. "You know, I never thought I'd say this, but I'm kind of glad it happened. Not because it was good or anything, but because it brought us closer. Like, I feel like I actually know you now." Evelyn reached over, squeezing her hand. "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." As the golden light of dusk bathed the yard in warmth, they sat in comfortable silence, letting the moment stretch out between them. Neither knew exactly what the future held, but they faced it together, with courage, resilience, and an unshakable bond forged through fire. For Evelyn, the journey had taught her that protecting her family didn't mean shielding them from the world. Sometimes it meant standing beside them as they faced it. For Amara, it had shown her that even in the darkest moments, there was strength to be found, and that speaking up could spark change far beyond what she imagined. And so, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, they embraced the promise of tomorrow. Their story wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, a testament to love, bravery, and the enduring power of hope.